Glad to have you back. And on to the next discussion. Crude oil prices have been on a steady increase for some months now.
Reports say the rise in crude oil price was further supported by Saudi Arabia's cap on the country's crude oil exports, as well as the continued crude oil production by Nigeria and Libya.
Well, with this rise in oil price, many say the good might be here again for Nigeria, that it's still very much dependent on oil. On the other hand, others argue that huge proceeds from oil sales might detract the federal government from its diversification agenda and stump the growth of the agriculture and mining sectors.
But how will this development really affect the Nigerian economy, either positively or negatively? Is the question we'll be asking our guest this morning. All right, we have joining us Gbenga Onitilo. He's a public and social commentator, and he's been monitoring this. We've had him so many times to talk about these issues. Gbenga, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Welcome. Now, anytime they talk about increase in price of crude oil in the international market, Nigeria seems to be very happy. You know, Nigerians are just happy and all of that. But how much of a blessing or a curse is that to us from the window of the fact that Nigerians tend to forget about every other thing they are doing and then concentrate and wait for that easy money that comes from crude oil?
Well, it's... the economies of today are no longer built around oil. They're built around knowledge. The economies of the future are built around knowledge base and human capacity development. And we need to just look back a bit. How did we get to where we are? As at 2014, we were generating proceeds of about $17 billion from crude oil. Got to 2015, we went as low as $40 billion. In 2016, we went as low as $30 billion. And so people that are talking about the recession thing, decline started from 2014, gradually. That was when it started, and it declined further till we got to where we are in 2017. If you also look at the first quarter report on export earnings, Nigeria had total about 3.1 trillion total earning from export earnings that we had. About 78% of it was from crude oil, export earnings from oil and gas, which is about 2.4 trillion something. Then the non-oil sectors gave about 650 billion, which means our economy is still built around fully dependent on oil. I think it has moved up about over $56 as we speak, which basically, that is what is giving us the bulk of the earning we are having, and that's what the CBN is using as some form of capital controls to be able to cushion the effect between the parallel and the official markets, which a whole lot of us have argued is not systemic, but that is where we are. And it's not something to plan your economy around, because most of the people that are presently, India remains our #1 buyer of crude oil, but they are cutting down on that as well, which over time is still going to impact on our earnings. So the whole world is moving away from fossils. They are moving to other renewable sources of energy, and these are not steady times for us, because if you look at, it's an uneasy calm that we have. What we have are just, which basically, that is what is giving us the bulk of the earning we are having, and that's what the CBN is using as some form of capital controls to be able to cushion the effect between the parallel and the official markets, which a whole lot of us have argued is not systemic, but that is where we are. And it's not something to plan your economy around, because most of the people that are presently, India remains our #1 buyer of crude oil, but they are cutting down on that as well, which over time is still going to impact on our earnings. So the whole world is moving away from fossils. They are moving to other renewable sources of energy, and these are not steady times for us, because if you look at, it's an uneasy calm that we have. What we have are just opportunities to stabilize what is going on. But we know we've been shouting about this thing about diversifying the economy. The economy is already diversified. What needs to be diversified is the sources of earning of government revenue. That's what needs to be enhanced. If you look some months back, I think there was an executive order signed by acting president of Shibajo, which one focuses on export terminals for agricultural products, produce. A special terminal where there will be transparency, drainage, some level of exception that fast track the process of exports of agricultural products. The executive order is there, but several terminals are being worked on, but the implementation is still a major challenge at the moment, which if those kind of things pull through, it will further enhance exports you get from things like agriculture. You're also looking at the manufacturing sector. So much thing needs to be done there in terms of power. Power is still a major issue. The ease of doing business is critical. If we're going to diversify government earnings, you also, because a lot of people will rejoice, but people don't know Nigeria has so much huge debt liability. For example, every 100 naira you earn as a country, close to about 60% is going into servicing interest on loan, not even repayment. So when people keep saying the oil boom is back, but you still need to also look at quite a whole lot of things that are going wrong.
Indeed, you've said a lot really in a breath, and it's quite alarming that many are still thinking, yes, the country is getting more money at this time.
We're too far away.
Nigerian economy is still susceptible to external shocks, not even internal shocks now.
Because we're applying our life around things we don't control.
Exactly. So
we don't have control over those things.
If crude oil prices drop tomorrow, Nigeria is back to square one, and then if it drops maybe to $20 per barrel, imagine the kind of song we'll be singing. So it seems that at this time, we should be talking more, like you said, is diversification of earnings of the government, and agriculture seems to be the way to go. But then, with the way the ministry,
not in this age.
Well, the government, what the government is saying, it seems to be the next step for this government. They want to do a lot in using it to employ people and, of course, to shore up exportation. But then the government is even exporting raw materials, yam, cassava. Many have talked about processing products before exporting them. You get more money that way, and of course then you get to, shore up your economy. Do you agree?
Yeah. For me, people will say it's agriculture. The world has moved away from, in the United States, for America, for example. Do you know how many farmers they have? After the population over 300 million. The number of farmers you have are not even more than 3 million farmers in the whole of the United States, as big as it is. And governments, even what people will say, in this part of the world we're in, farmers are not really rich. It's the people that are the value hand that are really rich. The people that create the value hand are the ones that really make the money. You know why they are richer in places like the United States of America? Because the government provides a lot of subventions for them. 70% of the produces that come from our farms, most of them don't find their way to the market. Maybe about 30, 40%, like tomatoes, all those perishables that find their way to the market. Why? You've not dealt with the issues of things like storages. You have not dealt with the issue of providing farm equipment to subsidize that for farmers. You have not fully dealt with the issue of transportation, logistics. Quite the network of logistics, which from the interland to the mainland. You have not dealt with transportation, maybe by rail from all of these produces, storages, hybrid seedlings for farmings. You are looking at, for example, we don't even have enough in Africa, based on FAO reports. The number of tractors per farm, per hectare, Nigeria has a huge shortfall in that. When you want to work on the farm, the number of tractors you're supposed to have, we have a huge deficit on that, which means the core of what we are still doing is more still subsistence farming. So look at, is it Togo or I've forgotten the country in Africa that produces a lot of cocoa. At the end of the day, the earnings they have cannot be compared to what Swiss generates from chocolate. People that make the value end products. Because the value end product from agricultural produce, if you can build a value chain around that, from the farms, you create more opportunity for employment, you create more wealth, which will also lead to you exporting and earning more from that. So The only way Nigeria is going to get to where it ought to go, that we have a stable economy thriving, is when our exports begin to exceed our imports. But right now, we are still at the state. That's why it's still very fragile. Some people say we are out of recession. You are out of recession when you get back to where you were in 2014. That's when you say you are out of recession. You need to get back to where you are as at 2014, about 2.6% thereabout. When you move to there, what we are just experiencing is just a recovery. We are not out of it. Until you get back to where you are in 2014, that's when you can say, because decline started in 2014. And it was sporadic as from 2015 when this government came in because of some issues that we were not prompt to resolve, like capital controls. We're supposed to provide on the economy, the valuation of the naira, quite a whole lot of things that delay. So it's a whole bundle of things that need to come on the table. The executive orders have their place in terms of the ease of doing business and a whole lot of that, but implementation on some of these things. So agric, we can be shouting agric, but if you look at the GDP of Nigeria, the service sector provides close to about 52–53% of the GDP. So I'm wondering why we're not focusing our attention to enhance those sectors with policies that will enhance those sectors, create more opportunities, create more enablement from them, provide tax holidays, tax exemptions. Those are also critical. Because if we keep saying agriculture, manufacturing, with data should guide what we do. The decisions we make, the policies we make, also the prudence of government. The prudence. Because if you have a country that for every 100 naira that you are generating, you are spending about 60% to start interest on loan, then there is something else you need to address. Your fiscal discipline in terms of judicious utilization of government funding. That also is critical.
All right, we see countries like Dubai, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia using huge revenues from oil, divesting them into science technology, into other areas and all of that. If we come back to Nigeria, like you said, there is deficit in everything. In all the measurement indexes across the world, in every sector, Nigeria is not faring well. There is no one single measurement index you say Nigeria is at the top 5 best performing, as the case may be.
Nigeria is at the 13th position in the fragile state index. It used to be called a failed state index.
So where do we really start from? If we have to, with all this deficit, with all of this plethora of issues that we have, where should we actually, where should be the first step to take in ensuring that we get back to that buoyant stand?
So basically, it's to a lot of executive orders have gone on in terms of the ease of doing business. I think the government should focus more on how we implement some of these executive orders. The implementation is critical. Like I told you about the agricultural terminals, based on the executive order that is supposed to ease the exports of agricultural products. If we are sincere enough, we are proactive enough to enhance some of these things. Also, you look at the ease of doing business for people, for example, in the service sectors. You are looking at, because when you have an economy that is under recession, for example, just coming out of recession, you need to stimulate the capacity of people to spend. If you are going to waive VAT, if you are going to waive payee, so there are
especially
things
for startups.
For startups. So there are things you need to do, because if people don't spend on an economy, you can't generate revenue. True. Government makes money from people having capacity to spend. So that's why when you look at the consumer price index, which is still about 16.1%, and the capacity of people to spend at a time like this, those are the things you need to stimulate. Because if people cannot spend, then government cannot generate more money, because your government generates money more from levies and taxes and duties and all that. But if you cannot stimulate the capacity of people to spend, those are all the things you should be looking at. Tax waivers, even the airlines are complaining, huge tax burden on the airlines. Are there waivers? So when you start giving waivers for critical sectors of the economy that are productive and producing, those are the things we need to start looking at. How to give them waivers, how to give them subventions. It's beyond just having strong capital controls. Government itself needs to be more prudent and disciplined in the way they utilize funding. We've been shouting a whole lot of things about devolution of power. I think some of those things are also critical. They're going to help us. For example, you look at the issue of VAT. Lagos State, I think, generates about close to 77% of the VAT. I think that there needs to be something looked at. You generate about 70% of it, you give it to the federal. The federal is going to be the one to determine how you utilize the VAT you generate from your region. It should be Lagos State, for example, that should determine how that goes, because it should be able to put that into aiding businesses that are up in generating those funding. When you look at the states like the Sharia states like Kano, they are not contributing anything significant, but they are sharing a huge chunk from VAT. So there are quite a lot of things that are wrong here. So if you don't deal with all those critical issues, then you look at all the states as well. IGR for most of the states, their IGR cannot even pay salaries. So, and most of them, they need to start positioning themselves to attract investment.
Yeah, but it is. You mentioned Kano, but it's really arguable because after when it comes to markets in Nigeria, after Lagos, Kano is the next place because a lot of people, although we know a lot of companies.
When you look at the
Ogun State, when it comes to revenue generation, Ogun State is there.
Lagos State.
But certainly, Kano is very significant in the north when it comes to generating revenues as well.
It's very critical to the north in generating revenue, but for a government to thrive, to move, you need the collaboration with the private sector.
All right.
If you don't create the ease of doing business, if you don't create a system where you can attract the attraction investment, because the problem we have is government wants to be doing everything. And that's not the role of government.
Okay.
So government must create itself in such a way to attract the investment that will fund the deficit gap you have in taking care of infrastructure and creating employment. Government is not supposed to create employment.
All right, let's quickly, because of time. For example, Rwanda by 2020 is going to be hopes to be a knowledge-based society, to move from agriculture-based one. And then, of course, it's done a lot in improving education sector. So much that right at the moment, private schools are closing up because they just cannot compete with public schools there. But when you come to Nigeria, the story is so different. ASU's just called off strike. So tell us now how important it is really, how education will play active role in improving the Nigerian economy, and how government should take education. Really.
No. Three critical things. Number one, education. Number two, health. Number three, security. We've not gotten education right. And if you look at it, Rwanda got it right by making sure basic education, first 9 years, is free. Free meal for all the children in school. They invested so much in ICT. And for example, you have your higher institutions. Also is just returning from strike. It's a completely failed system, because if you have what you have, the OBEC funds, for example, that is supposed to ensure that basic education is free, and that is not happening. Let me give you an instance: 18,000 primary and secondary schools in Lagos State, over 18,000. You know how many of them are public schools? About 1,002 or 1,003 are public schools. And that is, government is supposed to be the one to provide majorly from our constitution, public basic education, which is supposed to be free. The funds are there, the OBEC funds. But if you have failed to even make your budget based on UNESCO standard, maybe about 23–26% going to education, then you have failed. Because education is the future that guarantees where a country is going. For example, the higher institutions are supposed to be a place of research. When America was in depression in those days, universities like IMT and all that were research institutes that were providing direction, clear direction to the country in terms of agriculture, in terms of technology. Most of the ideas that moved America from where they are to where they ought to be came from the higher institutions. And that is why I look at people in the higher institutions in Nigeria that keep looking at government alone, but they've not positioned themselves in such a way to have private entities, foundations to come in to fund critical issues in the higher institutions. So the people that are managing this institution, even themselves, are not thinking right. Everything is not about government. You must be able to structure yourself in such a way that you become a research institute, that people all over the world are providing funding, subventures for you to be able to survive and thrive. It's beyond government. It means they also don't have the capacity to do what needs to be done. So education is critical. If this country is going to move forward, if education is not dealt with, if it's not addressed, then we're not going to move out of this
All
mess.
right. Education, health, and security.
Those are the three primary things the government should focus on.
All right.
Benga
Onitilo.
Onitilo, yeah,
Thank you
public
so
and
much.
social commentator. Thank you for coming.
All right.